I've just given away all of my elves that were made after the year 1995. I suppose I'm going to say firstly, this is not. I'm not critical of figures made after 1995. I just don't love them. I don't care about them. I don't invest anything in them. It's me, Galen. They mean nothing to me, and that's been true for a long time. I stopped playing fantasy probably for 13, 14 years ago because it wasn't. I didn't get the buzz out of it that I used to get when I was a teenager back in the early 1970s. And I tried everything. I've tried all the different games. I've tried boxed games. I've tried modern figures. I've tried the Warhammer games. I've tried buying into the creeds and the histories, and nothing. And me and a pal of mine at the War Games Club had a huge fantasy game, and we wheeled out everything we own that's fantasy, and we put all of the bad stuff on one side, and we put all of the good stuff on the other side, and we threw dice, and he ended up being in charge of the bad guys, and I ended up being in charge of the good guys, and it was a whopping battle on an 8-foot by 4-foot table that was totally covered in figures, and it did nothing for me. Nothing. So I said to him at the end of the game, when you're packing them figures up, take them home. I don't want them. I'm not interested. But I have another friend who is of my generation who has gone through a similar War Games journey to me, and he is in the process of downsizing. And I've got a brother who is a war gamer who I introduced to gaming in the probably early 80s, and I've got figures that I've had in boxes that I've not looked at for a long time because they were old-fashioned and nobody wanted to see them. So I started digging them out instead, and I got some things off my friend at the club. I got some things from my brother. I got some things from eBay, I'll be honest. I got some things from cardboard boxes up in the attic that were all covered in dust and cobbledy-webs. So when I opened it up, it's a bit like opening Pandora's box. And like Pandora's box, it was full of treasure. And I think Pandora's box was full of elves. Yeah, it must have been. Now, there are those amongst you who are looking at that figure and thinking, that's a funny looking elf. Well, you'd be right if it was an elf, but it's not an elf. I've put this in to tease you because I didn't like the elves at the time. This is a 1973 miniature figurines Ithilien. And the elves are quite short and stocky. I've got them, but they're not my favourites. These are Ithiliens, and with the face masks on, and I thought they looked more like the sorts of elves I wanted my elves to be, slightly taller. Because miniature figurines did two elves. They did a high elf who was very tall, with an arrow that kept annoyingly snapping off, and a lower wood elf. The wood elves had more variety. The wood elves had archers, and they had swordsmen, and they had cavalry, and they had a king. But they weren't the best models. So I used these. They're not elves. Prove it. You can't see his ears. He's got his hat on. You can't see his face. He's got a hood on. Go on, tell me it's not an elf. I dare you. Oh, okay, it's not an elf. Fair enough. Thankfully, for our sanity, wargaming moved quite quickly in the early 70s into the fantasy areas. And so we came away very quickly from the Tolkien-esque Lord of the Rings fantasy, which is what miniature figurines were doing. Miniature figurines figures in the early mid 1970s were licensed by the Tolkien estate, and they were all to replicate something in Lord of the Rings. They didn't. The Barrow-wights, for example, are those silly archetypal ghosts that look like a fellow who's put a white sheet over his head, running around with his arms up going, whoa! Having said that, they're very funny to suddenly arrive in a dungeon nowadays, because people are not expecting them. Gollum looks like a massive great frog. He's bigger than an elf, and he's all fat like a Michelin man. He's got big boggly eyes. The Balrog looks like a lion with a whip. My middle brother didn't really get into Lord of the Rings. He liked Narnia, and he used the Balrog to be a battle version of Aslan. It looked so much like a lion. But anyway, I digress through elves. I do digress, don't I? So these are the next elves I used, and now we started to get elvish. These are the bulk of my elven army today. These are spearmen, quite clearly, but because they're elves, of course, they've always got a bow. These are from a sword and sorcery range, and these came very quickly after Lord of the Rings. It wasn't long in the 70s. We started off... first time I saw somebody playing fantasy, I went, oh, The Hobbit. And I was quite quickly slapped down by the older players who said it's Lord of the Rings. And we're okay. But within 2 years, it wasn't Lord of the Rings. It was Dungeons and Dragons. And those people who couldn't do Dungeons and Dragons as a company because they didn't have the trade licenses, copyright, they started to make their own names up. There was a big argument about Warhammer calling orcs with the C because that was Lord of the Rings, and they changed it to a K, and oh my word, there were all sorts of, instead of people just going, you know what, let's have some fun, it all got dead business-like. But sword and sorcery wasn't Lord of the Rings, and sword and sorcery wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, so it could be anything you wanted. And I've got a lot of sword and sorcery figures, which, because they were around at the time I was in college, 75 to 78. So that was perfect time for me as a gamer to be at college buying these sorts of figures. And these are my, well, they're not all my elves. There's just 2 of all my elves. I've got a lot of them. Now, I'm showing this elf for a reason. And some of you will be going, hey, whoa, hang on a minute. Where are the elves from the 80s? I don't know. Because I definitely bought this one in about 94, 95. And I know that because I was head teacher of a primary school, and I painted him in the Easter holidays. And I used him and the other 3 I bought at the same time from Games Workshop as brothers on a solo adventure, and they ended up, I didn't know where they were going, I just did it all on graph paper with random dice, and they ended up in every room they went in, it seemed to be full of rats, so it turned out to be a Skaven system underground. But I've got another 3 of these lads. So these are, I'm not saying I don't like war games, different other periods and stuff. What I'm saying is these are my favourites. I have a lot of nostalgic love for this man. Painted with probably amongst the first time I ever used acrylic paint. I probably started using acrylic paint in the late 80s, in fairness. It was an Eldar I painted with acrylic paint. I was really nervous and wasn't happy about it. Can you imagine? So there he is. There he is. Still there in all his glory. Still busy, still turning out on our adventures. Still strikes me as being a lovely figure. Can I? If I go back, look, you can see the top of his spear. Oh, that's me. Whoa! Yeah. Nice, isn't he? I painted this lad for a dungeon which was set in the autumn. And the theory was that the elves in this region obviously wore a clothing that was appropriate to the colours. So in the summer, they wore greens and browns. and in the winter they wore whites and greys and blacks, and in the autumn they wore that colour. This is an elf dressed as a knight of the autumn, and in spring they wore paler greens and whites and yellows to reflect the woodland colours, blue perhaps for bluebells, but they reflected the area they lived in. So he's got armour on as well, which is nice. He's got armoured boots. So you need them when you're living in an autumn forest as an elf. You always need a good pair of boots. But this was a role-play adventurer, so he needed to be toughened up. I'm not even sure, actually, if he's an elf. I don't know. Tell me, comment, let me know. Somebody knows who he is. I can't remember now, but I don't care. I honestly don't care. This is my figure. I wanted him to be an elf. You can't see his ears or his hair. There's no reason why he shouldn't be an elf. So in my game, he was an elf. And I think that's probably true of this lad. I think this lad's probably a ranger. I don't think this is an elf. I think this is a citadel type ranger. Not even sure what year. After I made that bold comment about after 1995, I hate figures, somebody's going to say he's 1996. You just know it, don't you? Well, like I said, let me know. That'd be good. Tell me who they are. I'm pretty sure this must be, it's got to be Citadel, surely. But I still use him on a regular basis as an elf. In fact, he fought a battle a couple of months ago as an elf warrior. Usually as an elf commander, to be honest. But he's got a good look about him. I really do like him. And he's wasted as a ranger. I'm not keen on rangers, but I love elves. So there you go. He's now an elf. And they're the types of elves I use. So you've had a little look at my elf journey from 1972, when I'd never even seen an elf, to 2026, when I've just given all my elves away and started collecting all the elves I used to have 50 odd years ago. Like a true wargamer, aren't I? Like, it's proper, this lad. I'm not messing about. So there we have it, my elf journey. I'd just like to leave you with a message from our sponsors. If you are a collector of elves, please, we ask you very earnestly not to store them in boxes or containers which are likely to be endangered by fire or the proximity of fire, because, as we all know, smoking will ruin your elf.